Sorry to miss it. Yeah. Hopefully you can return on us. Because there's so many things going on, like they got this today. Yeah.
I can't see it.
And solar.
Got it?
What you need?
Oh,
No, I got this, but
I'm just
Oh,
gonna
the
balance it.
that's.
Balance it on your nose.
You want me to go with this? You have this
It's real tiny.
right, I think I am all set. Okay, so let's begin. All right. So I couldn't remember if we had gotten through all the saints in the last in that last handout that we've gone through or not, and so I went ahead and I'm told that we have one left, so we might revisit that one next time. That's right. But just to be safe, I brought with me just a longer look at the readings for today, because there's certainly a lot in there that we did not get to. Now, first of all, what did you notice anything that's slightly different about the readings today?
Nice. You got sharp eyes.
So what
Sorry.
what are the three typical readings that we have?
No Old
every Sunday?
Testament lesson today. Yeah, no
Yeah,
Old Testament.
very good. Yeah, today there's no Old Testament reading. Instead, where was that first reading from?
Acts.
Book of Acts. Yeah, very good. And so then we'll have a few days of readings from the Book of Acts that really follows the history of what happened in the days and the weeks and even months after Christ's ascension as well. We're kind of skipping ahead a little bit, although we still have a little bit of time before the ascension, don't we? How long was Jesus on earth before he ascended?
40 days.
40 days, yeah. And then 10 days after that is another important day. What day comes 10 days after the 40 days? No, the ascension is the 40
Oh, the
days.
whole Pentecost.
Pentecost.
Very good, very good. You didn't know your memory was being tested today, did you? You should by now, though, shouldn't you? Yeah, so 40 days after Easter is Ascension Day. That's always a Thursday, because it's always 40 days. And then 10 days after that, which brings it very nicely brings it back to a Sunday, is Pentecost. So we have a little bit of time yet before we celebrate that.
What's the Ascension worship for this year?
Sorry?
What's the Ascension worship for this year? Is it
Not
here?
sure what you're asking.
When is it?
When and
Here
where?
at Bear Grove?
Oh, it's here, yeah. Yeah, Fairgrove is elected to do, continue to do separate services, so. Yeah. We're not cool enough for them. No.
Oh, no.
Feel free to tell Pastor Haller I said that, but that's not actually the reason.
He would.
All right, so instead of the Old Testament reading, we have the first reading from the book of Acts, and then the reading from 1 Peter today, still an epistle reading, and then the Holy Gospel. And at the top of your handout, that paragraph about the Gospel reading, it points out one of the unique parts of the Gospel reading for today. What lectionary do we follow? Do you remember that? We don't follow the one-year lectionary. We follow the 3-year lectionary. So that means that year A, there's a different set of readings from year B, and year B is a different set of readings from year C, and then year C is different from year A. And so the readings don't repeat for 3 years then. This is one exception. There are a few dates, like obviously Christmas, Easter, some of those important dates have the same readings for each year in the series, regardless of whether it's A, B, or C. But this is another day where the gospel reading for today is the same for all 3 years, because it has such a long tradition as the gospel reading for the Sunday after Easter. First of all, what was the mindset of the apostles when we come to that day? Let me back up a step, because the gospel reading actually takes place on 2 different days, doesn't it? So you start with Easter Sunday, right? That first part happened on Easter Sunday, Jesus appearing to the disciples in the upper room. Okay. Thomas, of course, was not there. And so then, I believe it's 8 days later, Jesus appears to all of them, including Thomas. And so that's the timeline for these readings, or for the events in this reading.
But they were still locked in their upper room.
They were still, yep, they were
locked
still
down.
locked down. They were still locked away because of
Afraid.
fear. Yep. Yep. Very good. Okay. And then famously, how did Jesus get in?
We just went through.
You just went in.
That's right. He just entered, right? The door was locked, and yet he had the ability to enter that locked room. He didn't have to go down through the chimney. Right? He didn't, crawl in through the, there was no window that he snuck through. He didn't have lock picks with him, or anything like that. But he simply was able to physically pass through either the wall or the door or whatever it was, or simply appear there in that room. So here, that's before we get to the questions on your handout. There's a point to be made in that detail as well. Right? We've talked about his state of humiliation. Right? What parts of let's put it in terms of the Apostles' Creed. Which phrases in the second article of the Apostles' Creed describe Jesus' state of humiliation? Do you remember?
Suffered under Pontius Pilate.
Suffered under Pontius Pilate, that's certainly part of it. Right?
Crucified, died, was
He
buried.
was dead and
Yep.
buried.
Okay. Is that all of it? Is that the entire thing of his state of humiliation?
He descended into hell.
No, actually.
That was
Hold that
glory.
thought.
That
Hold
was
that
his-
thought.
oh,
Conceived
Hold
by
that
the
thought.
Holy
Hold
Spirit.
Sorry.
When did his state of humiliation
Conceived of the
begin?
Holy Spirit. Born
Yeah,
of
it
Virgin Mary.
began with his conception.
Okay,
Right?
okay.
When we talk about his state of humiliation, we're not just talking about when he was physically humiliated by the soldiers and so on and so forth, as we remembered last week. His state of humiliation was the time during which he set aside his divine power. He did not always and fully use, that's the catechism definition, he did not always and fully use his divine powers or divine nature. Right? He did sometimes. When he performed the miracles, he was acting according to his divine nature, showing that he was in fact the Son of God. But he did not always and fully use that. Now, after the resurrection, he is entering his state of exaltation. So he is using his divine nature now. And so that's why he's able to enter that room physically, because that physical, and this is a whole different, I mean, we could take months and months of like Monday through Friday classes to talk about the communication of attributes and that kind of thing, that aspect of Christology. But the short answer is, the short version is that his human nature now begins to share in the divine nature. It begins to take on some of those. It's still human, right? But there's a communication of attributes there. So he is now able to enter locked rooms, for example. Alan?
Actually, the Apostle Creed ain't got it quite right, because he didn't descend into hell. He descended into hell after he rose from the dead, not after he died.
What do you mean they don't have it right?
Now, you're talking about the timing, the ordering of events. Okay. Yeah, there is an argument to be made that it has the order slightly reversed. But,
They don't have it
but-
right.
but I personally, I lean toward he descended into hell before the resurrection. But that's a debate we can have some other time.
Talk to Pastor Schwicker, although he ain't.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but what
That's
does the
right.
Bible say?
That's part of the challenge. The Bible does not go into a great deal of detail there. in
Exactly,
that.
so,
So we have to be careful about how much we say about that, beyond simply the fact that it happened, because Scripture does say that it happened.
Yep.
And it also is clear that he did not descend into hell to suffer. He descended into hell to proclaim victory. Yeah, okay. So, back to that point, the descent into hell was the beginning of, it was not part of his state of humiliation, it was the beginning of his state of exaltation. Yeah, very good. So again, this all has an important bearing on our Christology, how we understand who Jesus was, the fact that there were these two natures that are joined together somehow, and it helps us to clarify how that works and what that means and all that sort of thing. All right, so what was Jesus? How did Jesus greet the disciples that day?
Peace. Peace be with you.
My peace be with you.
Yeah, peace be with you. That's right. Now, as the handout points out, that was a common greeting, right? But how did that greeting take on a new meaning on this particular occasion?
Those greetings should have been, thanks a lot. For abandoning me.
Where were you?
See what you did for, you know what I mean? But seriously, I mean, that's what we would probably
Or
do.
even just, I told you so, right?
Yeah.
I told you were, Peter, you said you'd be there. I told you, right?
Right.
At
But
least
he
I told you.
didn't. I mean, it was,
That's right.
all
Peace
the
be with
worries, fears. I mean, because I've often thought, what took them so long? Why are they still cowering in a room in fear when they know that he's risen? But I think maybe, in some respects, they were afraid of what Jesus might say,
Mhm.
right? And so, what does he say first to them, right?
Peace be with you. Yeah.
By the way, you can't blame them, they ain't God, and they know the truth are after.
Well, right, but
Absolutely. Right. Yeah, a very human reaction, right? Very understandable reaction, no doubt.
Yeah, Jesus could have easily just got himself out of trouble, no matter if they came after him again, but the other ones can't. The
Yeah.
humans couldn't.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, if you notice, he actually says that a couple times in this reading, right? It comes out right at the beginning in verse 19. Peace be with you. And then where does that come up again? And I'm in John 20 if you want to follow along in your own Bibles as well. So the first time is John 19, and then verse 21. Again, he said to them,
Peace be with you.
peace be with you. And then what is added to it here?
And the Father has sent me, even so I
That's right.
send you.
So this is Jesus commissioning them as apostles. And so this is the next kind of tangent that I wanted to take a minute to look at here. What is an apostle, and are we supposed to have apostles today? What's the deal here, right? But I mean, very quickly, let me see if I can. Anyway, well, it wouldn't help much. But the word for even so, I am sending you, that it's a form of the word apostle, right? Apostolos simply means sent ones, right? And so the fact that Jesus is sending him is kind of the defining aspect of, or one of the defining aspects of what makes an apostle. But what was their main task as apostles? Have you ever thought of that? What was the main job description of an apostle?
to make other apostles.
To make, if we say it's to make other apostles, then that suggests that we should still have apostles today.
To proclaim,
Well,
And
make
we
disciples.
don't. Yeah, to make
Make
disciples.
only.
Yeah. So is there a difference between disciple and apostle? We often use those words interchangeably.
Could one be a leader and the other a follower?
In a
The
sense,
disciple
but
was more of a follower, the
especially if we keep it in the context of Maundy Thursday, right? That Jesus, showing that he was the leader by washing his
because now
disciples'
they're
feet.
not following, they're the ones going out and preaching and
Mhm.
teaching.
Yep. What we're driving at, though, is the main task of an apostle was to witness to the Lord's resurrection, right? To be able to testify they had seen the risen Christ. Right? And that's one of the reasons why Thomas really kind of gets a bad rap today, right? Because he was, in fact, one of the apostles. He was one of the sent ones, and what was he sent to witness to to the fact that he had seen Jesus alive. And so, is he wrong in saying, well, I need to see the scars in his hands, I need to see the scars in his feet, I need to see the scar in his side? No, he's not wrong.
He couldn't say that if
That's right.
he didn't see it himself.
If you didn't see it.
That's right. That is part of what he's been being sent out to do. And so that's why Jesus, one of the reasons why Jesus gives him what he asks for. And then, by the way, when we jump to, no, sorry. So before we jump to the interaction with Thomas, what does Jesus do in verse 20? After he says, peace be with you, he does what? Before he breathed on them, he showed the other 10 his hands and his side.
Yeah, right.
So again, what Thomas is asking for here, he's saying, I want to see his hands, I want to see his side, I want to see the scars, just like you did. So he's only asking for what the other apostles had asked for as well. Bottom line, though.
Unfortunately, he takes the ridicule because his words are, unless I see it.
Yes, yeah.
That's
Or at least that's the way they've been
ridicule.
translated to,
Yeah.
translated and transmitted to us. Yeah.
Right, that's how it's.
Yeah, absolutely. But even at that, at the end of the story, is he doubting or is he believing?
He's believing.
He's believing, right?
Yeah.
There are plenty of cases where people demanded signs in the Gospels. And what did Jesus say to them? Often it started with, a wicked and adulterous generation asks for a sign, but, right? He was not often very receptive to people's request for signs, right? Part of that was because he was doing signs all the time. Just follow him for a little bit, and you're going to see something. Right?
After all you've seen, just trust.
That too, right?
Yeah, right.
Some of the people that asked for signs, he's like, what have you been watching me do all this time? Right? What more do you want me to show you? Pointing to the fact that they're not asking to genuinely believe, right? They're not asking with a genuine, heart to seek the truth. They're asking in order to try to dismiss him and have an excuse for dismissing him and rejecting him. Right? Thomas, by contrast, says, okay, unless I see the scars, I won't believe. And by the way, that's not a bad standard for belief for us as Christians, is it? And we're going to qualify that a little bit, but what does Paul say about the resurrection? He says, if Christ was not actually raised, then your faith is in vain. Right? In fact, not only is your faith in vain, we're liars, and you shouldn't believe anything that we tell you. So again, what Thomas is asking about, what he's kind of probing there, if you'll excuse the pun, is the very central aspect of our faith. Right?
That is how sometimes rumors get going. Somebody will say, well, I saw this. Well, I didn't see it.
Sure.
And then they add to it.
Mhm.
And that's how
Yeah.
it's unshapen. It probably wasn't even anything near what had happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is what
Yeah, and
we
so
know happened.
absolutely, he's able to testify firsthand. Not just he heard the other apostles tell him that they had seen, but he himself had seen. So why did Jesus kind of repeat that blessing of peace be with you as he sent them, as he commissioned them as his representatives?
It was given the power of the Holy Spirit.
Okay. Attached to the promise of the Holy
Attached to
Spirit.
the
Absolutely.
promise of the Holy Spirit.
Absolutely. Yeah, why else might he have
Also,
repeated
the
that?
price has been paid. I mean, it's all done.
Yeah.
All you gotta do is believe it.
That's another big part of it, right? He's not sending them out because they've got to achieve this huge mission. They've got to make something happen. Right? It is finished, and they're going out in that victory in order to, as they witness to his victory, right? That he has in fact been raised. Now, before we go on to the next question, I wanted to tie this into something that you see frequently in our liturgy that just kind of goes right past you, but I want to think about that for a moment. Right? So in our communion liturgy, I think it's common to all 5 settings of the communion liturgy, after the words of institution, before we move on with the Agnus Dei, sing Lamb of God, take away the sin of the world, the pastor says to the people, the peace of the Lord
Be with you all.
be with you always. Why stick that in at that point? What's the significance of that?
We're gonna be communing together and
Going to be communing together. And so that is part of the reason why, if you notice in, I believe it's most of them, if not all the divine settings of the divine service, there's that note about, the members of the congregation may greet one another at this point, say peace be with you as a sign of reconciliation and peace, right? We don't generally do that, but that's actually a very ancient tradition. So it is a reminder of the peace among ourselves, but what else does it remind us? Who else is there? Who else is there with us?
Yeah.
When saying it to us, we're saying it to each other, and is that right? I mean,
Jesus is with us.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at, right? It's also a reminder that Christ has now entered the room with us.
to me, it's like an invitation to the table.
Yes, that too, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But it's also a reflection of the fact that Christ is now with us in just as miraculous a way for us as it was for them, right? The doors aren't locked here, but his presence with us is just as miraculous as it was for them that day. Right? And Christ has now entered, and has he, getting back to what you pointed out, has he come to accuse you?
No.
Has he come to say, I know what you did last Thursday? I heard what you said. No. He could very well come to accuse, but he doesn't come to accuse. What does he come to do? He comes to give you his grace.